ADHD kids often experience emotional abandonment because their needs aren't recognized as having ADHD or understood. So many parents, especially emotionally immature ones, see ADHD traits as quote unquote bad behavior instead of a brain difference. Hello, truth tellers. Welcome back to the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast. I'm Angie.
I'm Jeremy. If you've ever been the family member who asks too many questions, who got blamed for the chaos but never created it, who was told you're the problem for having real emotions, then this episode is for you. Because what they called too much was just unhealed truth, and their discomfort with your honesty reveals everything about them, not you.
Right. Love that.
Yeah.
Good intro.
Good
job.
read. Abandonment isn't always physical.
That's right. I think abandonment trauma can be confusing. I think talking about the language, understanding what things mean, finding words or definitions for certain experiences helps in your healing. But abandonment trauma results from experiencing or perceiving any type of abandonment that may have been extremely painful for you. It may be related to instances when you felt neglected, threatened, or left behind. And it's not just being left, it's feeling emotionally rejected, neglected, or invisible. So they're physically present, but emotionally gone. And ADHD kids often experience emotional abandonment because their needs aren't recognized as having ADHD or understood. So many parents, especially emotionally immature ones, see ADHD traits as quote unquote bad behavior instead of a brain difference.
So how does this work in the toxic family dynamic?
So ADHD kids don't just get ignored, they get blamed for being too loud, too sensitive, too much. And in emotionally immature families, needing support makes you the enemy. And you carry that weight of their emotional immaturity as your own inherent defect, really. And we'll start with emotionally immature mothers. So when they're unable to regulate their own emotions, so they demand their children regulate theirs. So we always needed to make sure she wasn't upset. And I mean, part of that was because we could see that she was being emotionally abused as well, right? So it's easy to kind of go there when you're witness to the harm they're receiving as well. And you may be enmeshed or distant, but either way, the child's emotional needs go unmet. So one of the most recent examples of this was when my older sister was talking to me when she, uncovered and learned while she was visiting our younger sister how we were being smeared and attacked by this abuser and basically being exiled from her life because of his fears of wanting to keep her isolated from those who genuinely cared about her and would stand up to abuse. And I was crying, visibly upset, like bawling. And my mom just walked right by us. She didn't attempt to console us or even ask if we were okay. And she was, I'm going, not a full excuse, but she was trying to keep the kids busy so that my sister and I could have this conversation away from the kids. So I'll give her that. But for me as a parent, I just can't imagine my kids sitting there bawling their eyes out, so heartbroken and in pain over what is happening, and not just hold them and let them know I'm there for them. So, I mean, here's the thing. She's watching the kids and keeping them busy. She didn't need to come and walk by us. Like, we went to Like, we went to the garage, which is outside the house completely. So she did, and she could have just given us a hug or anything. I don't know, like something. But it was just like, yep, I'm just doing laundry. I just wanted to come in and eavesdrop to see if you're hurting. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, huh? Why did that even happen? So in situations like that, I mean, it happened in other ways too, but that was just one that came to me when I was writing the episode. I was like, yeah, that's probably the biggest one that recently that stands out. But you often feel, you know, as a kid with ADHD, you often feel burdened as that parent, that immature parent, with the ADHD child who needs support. Like, why can't we just do what everybody else does? Like, why do we have to be different? Why do we have to go to bed early? Why do we have to leave this party early or whatever? It's just kind of like, I just want to be like, do what everybody else does. But because my kid has ADHD and this doesn't work for them, I have to miss out, or I have to do, like, I mean, I've never thought that. So it's really hard for me to even, like, I understand what happened to me, and that's the only reason I know how to explain it. But, you know, that kid feels like a burden. So we'll move on to narcissistic or abusive fathers, which I have. They demand control, perfection, and obedience, period. That's it. They punish difference. They punish sensitivity. And any of those things are perceived as a weakness of yours. And ADHD traits like impulsivity or forgetfulness are seen as defiance in his eyes. Like, the very essence of who you are was deemed a problem in his distorted reality. So when you have someone that demands control, perfection, and obedience, any difference that doesn't align with your idea of my way is the highway, or this is a way to do it, and the ADHD kid will still get the thing done, but they do it a different way, then it's still deemed wrong and they're still punished. So because me as a child, my brain was like, I don't understand how to do it that way, but I do understand how to do it this way, and this way will work. And it was punished instead of being like, oh, yeah, hey, that way works too. It's mind-blowing, right?
Right.
So when you enter the scapegoat role in these family dynamics, the scapegoat is often the truth teller, the emotional mirror, the different one. They become the target of blame because they refuse to comply with the family's delusions. And they're straight up delusions. Neurodivergence is a threat to a dysfunctional family order.
So how does this impact you through every stage of your life?
Yeah, I think that's something that I've really reflected on, obviously having our own kids, but like really trying to break apart like where I saw this, you know, show up. So as a child, the constant criticism, you know, attempts at shaming, punishment for needs that you can't control, feeling like love is conditional. And in my family of origin, love is conditional to this day. But when you feel like that as a kid, it is so confusing. You can't actually grasp that love is conditional. So you have to stay with the false hope that it's unconditional for a very long time. And that's to survive as a child. So that's where masking begins. You need to learn to be, quote unquote, easier in the eyes of these parents who are emotionally immature to survive. You have to try to fit into whatever box, and the box keeps changing, but you need to fit into that. You need to find a way to be easier, not a burden. And then as a teenager, of course, you're going through hormonal changes and there's identity confusion. So you're just like, what is wrong with me? And you can't ask them that question because they'll tell you.
Yes. Let me get my list out.
Yeah, let me just project all of my shitty behaviors and toxic patterns onto you real quick. But as a teen, you also become isolated, possibly misdiagnosed with depression or like an oppositional behavior disorder. That happens a lot. I wasn't receiving any help or support during that time, so I actually wasn't misdiagnosed, but I was definitely isolated and made to think, if I was sharing, a conflict with a friend or something, it was just, I couldn't trust anybody. You can't trust them. And so here's the thing, like part of them saying that you can't trust anybody, it felt like they were on your side. It felt like they're on your side, these people aren't. But when you're really in the house and you're doing the things, they're not on your side. So who's on your side? That's where the isolation comes in. You feel isolated, even with, for me, 6 other people around me all the time. I felt completely alone. And you may attract toxic friendships or, early partners who mirror family dynamics. I definitely feel like I went through different periods of time where, like, the friend who was, like, the problem or getting into trouble, I would kind of latch on, like, I can help them because everyone thinks I'm the problem, but I'm not. And I can help them, like, show people that they're not the problem. But then it would just be like, either that friend would betray me and prove, this toxic narrative that everyone is using you or harming you. I would keep that alive and I would, believe that at that point. Or it would just be like, they'd be introducing me to things that maybe I shouldn't be doing or, which I never did. That's the funny part. I would just be like, no, I'm not doing that. But it would still, I was linked or grouped with this person who was like a bad seed, then it would look bad for the family, right? Not doing anything wrong, but it would look bad because now I'm friends with this person, right? So then as a young adult, you struggle with emotional regulation, boundaries, self-worth. Like you kind of are just grasping at straws to put a life together because you have no person to, what am I trying to say? Why am I losing my words?
Like no role model?
Yes, thank you. Wow, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. And so you're often gaslighted in relationships or jobs because you're just used to invalidation. So like, it's not super off-putting. It doesn't make you go, yeah, I don't want this job anyway. Or, I don't need to be friends with this person. They're really awful to me, And you may start to seek help as a young adult. Therapy, for me, I started after my car accident. I was 21. And then went to therapy again around the time that I finally got diagnosed with ADHD. But you kind of feel guilt, and you can feel it. I didn't feel it as much just because when I went to therapy or, when I finally got my ADHD diagnosis, it all made sense. But I think sometimes when you're struggling so hard between your family's messaging and then this, healthy person who's trying to help you, they point out some things that are just so foreign to you that you can kind of feel like you're betraying your family, and you might even minimize it. Like I don't want to tell this therapist like the real deal because they're going to be like, what? I'm just going to it wasn't that bad. And this is something I talk to parents about in coaching about, when you go to a doctor and you're explaining your kid's ADHD symptoms or even if you're finally getting a diagnosis, it's really easy for us to minimize and try to not be a burden, even when it's in the doctor who's there to diagnose you and, your symptoms need to be at a certain, level of frequency and impacting your life. And if you continue to minimize it, they're not going to see clearly what your symptoms are. So just being honest with yourself. And it's really hard to do when you're a young adult, when you haven't had that role model and you're going, but so you go back and forth, right? As a young adult. And then as you're, becoming an older adult, you start your own family, you start rebuilding from the inside out. So you're realizing the trauma wasn't your fault, but with every person, no matter what happened to you, what trauma you went through, it is your responsibility to heal it and not just vomit it onto everyone around you. And it's difficult, but freeing yourself with estrangement or distance from abusive family members, it's difficult at first because in no way is this something that I wanted to do. In no way is this something in my perfect world would even exist. I don't want to have to go no contact. I don't want, my family of origin to hate me. I don't want that distance. Yes, I want a family, but I want a family that is living in reality, that is genuine and cares. I don't want just this, toxic family because that's what I was born into.
Right.
And as an adult, you begin embracing your neurodivergence as an identity part of you, but not a flaw. Like, it's just you may be different from other people, but they're different from you too. If they're, neurotypical, they're different. It's not wrong either way.
Yeah. So you said it's your responsibility to heal. In order to heal, you need to name the truth. So you were abandoned emotionally because your needs made others uncomfortable.
Right. And naming abandonment and scapegoating, it's like a revolutionary act of self-trust. It's so hard to actually realize that they abandoned you, that they're scapegoating you, that this is really happening. The name allows you to trust yourself and get back to who you are, but it doesn't mean it comes with, it's not pain-free.
No, I watched you go through workbooks and, chunk it out because it's huge. It's a constant gut punch. And I think that, you did the work, but watching you do the work, talking to you about the emotions that you were feeling, the worksheets you were doing to say, here's how I'm naming it, or, trying to get through this, how you talk to your therapist about it, how you talk to your siblings about it. You did it in chunks. You had to do it in pieces. And, you've talked about it. Part of it is kind of a grieving process, right? When you got to the point where you decided that no contact was the right step to take next, that involved a grieving process, right? Mm-hmm. And so each portion, you need to take it one portion at a time to decide. If you try to heal the whole thing at once, it just becomes overwhelming, and you can very easily sink into a cycle of depression and low self-worth and just, how do you get out of bed with all of that weighing on you? And it's like your lists, right?
Right.
You have to section it out and say, okay, I've identified it. This is what it is. Now, how can I work through that?
Right. And unfortunately, part of this grief, we'll have an episode coming up where we talk about ADHD and trauma and how they overlap. But part of the, going through trauma, it makes your ADHD symptoms worse. So as you're trying to work through a lot of these things, my hyper focus, when I would be learning something new and discovering, oh my gosh, this totally connects, I would do a deep dive. I would go down every rabbit hole. I would just immerse myself in understanding it because it felt so good to, have a name for that situation, to like really get it, to really grasp it. And, doing the deep dive helped me internalize it too, and kind of practice, the more you find, validating information about it, the more you can go, absolutely, like I am making the right choice. I knew that my gut was right, or whatever the situation is. But then there's also the side of it that because this emotional complex trauma is making me very aware, learning about healing about this trauma is making me so very aware that I become more hypervigilant. I notice my triggers popping up more and more. Like I could just be in the shower and a thought will come to me and I'll be like, oh my God, I just realized this thing, or, sometimes we'll be watching something and all of a sudden I'll be crying. And it doesn't necessarily seem like a part of the show that would cause that, but it's obviously my brain is putting together other things and there's like some sort of sensory connection to that show that's revealing these things. But, when you have to rebuild all of that, you do have to do it in chunks, and you don't want to just do a hyper focus and burn out. And I think that's what I would do in the beginning of my healing, is I would hyper focus, go down the rabbit holes, like all over the place, grab all this awareness, understanding, validation. And then I was like, I don't want to even look at it, hear about it. I complete detox from it. And then something else would come up and I would do the same thing until I exhausted myself and I would just burn out. So I did that a couple of times, I think. And, learning, what? I don't think I could handle that today. Or, we've talked about it before where we're like, we wake up and we're like, man, I am feeling like junk. I'm going to need some help today. There's moments like that actually being able to communicate them with a safe person is, part of naming that is actually being able to talk about it and communicate it clearly. And healing looks like, self-compassion, actually just being like, this is a lot. You've lived your entire life in survival mode and being attacked for 40 years. You're going to be tired. Mm-hmm. Allow yourself to rest. And, the safe relationships and chosen family, you have friends that feel like family, or, you have those very few relationships within your family that are safe, anything like that. You spend your time building those and growing your connection with those people and leave the toxic behind. Coaching, therapy, trauma-informed ADHD resources, seek them out. You never know, which coach, which therapist, which, trauma-informed resource you kind of connect with. Like there's a bunch of different people out there, and you find what you relate to and what you can connect to, and you go from there. It moves the needle forward in your healing, and you're not stuck. And then let go of trying to convince narcissists to care. They don't care. If they cared, they would show up. They would do these things. They would be trying to heal. They would be trying to speak the truth. They would be trying to hear your side of the story. They would be trying to do something. And you letting go, you not mending the fence, is not you harming them. It's you saying enough is enough. When you're ready to have a reciprocal relationship, then maybe we can have a conversation to move forward.
Yeah. So here's what I've learned today. Abandonment trauma is real and often invisible. ADHDers are more vulnerable to being scapegoated because you don't conform.
Yeah.
We've said that a million times.
Rarely, yeah.
Emotionally immature parents and narcissistic systems reject what they don't control.
Absolutely.
You're allowed to outgrow the role they forced on you.
Yep. Absolutely.
You have permission.
Yep.
We're giving you permission right now.
Yep.
Healing is painful, but freedom is worth it.
Oh my gosh, the freedom, the clarity that comes from freeing yourself. And here's the thing, we talk about this in relationships that are outside the family. There's like this special relationship given, or, pass given because they're your family. But if you had a toxic boss, you had a toxic friend, or you're in a toxic relationship, people would be like, get out of there. No, don't give them another conversation. No, you can't heal around them. They're toxic. But when it's your family, they're like, oh, but it's your mom. Oh, but it's your dad. Oh, but they're your family. And you're just like, huh? They're still human beings. They're still behaving in a relationship with you that's toxic, that's harmful to you. Why are they asking you to stay in an abusive situation? And you really do. You need to remove yourself. Even if I'm not saying go no contact forever. I'm saying if you just step back. I mean, I think initially it's a little lonely just because you've always been immersed in this toxic cocoon. But you break out and you start to feel like, oh my gosh,
butterfly.
I'm not getting inundated. I can actually just live. I'm not receiving these toxic messages all the time. And I mean, here's the thing. You were born to be real. You, authentically, not to be easy for someone else. That's a part that those toxic people, they can't handle. And in a dysfunctional family, the ones who see things clearly always become the threat. Your refusal to dim your light illuminates the darkness that they prefer. Don't dim your light for them. So if this episode hit home for you, subscribe, share it with someone who gets it, and leave a quick review. It helps more ADHD scapegoats find their way here. And if you're ready to dive deeper into your healing, check out my ADHD Scapegoat coaching program or reach out via direct message. You don't have to do this alone. You're not the problem. Till next time.